Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes in life we're confronted with challenges that seem to tower over us, battles that test us to our core. It's in those moments we may feel small, outmatched, maybe even lost. But here's the truth we have to hold on to: there is a power greater than us, fighting on our behalf. We must trust the divine strategy. You see, God doesn't do things by accident. When we're walking through a storm, it's not a random occurrence. No, it's part of a grander design. We might not see it now, but each step we take, each tear we shed, each prayer we say, it's part of a bigger plan. God is crafting something beautiful, something purposeful, even in our struggles. He is aligning resources, people, and circumstances that we cannot see. Trusting the divine strategy means embracing the understanding that there is a higher plan, a purpose that often goes beyond what we can see or even imagine. Every time we face a challenge, whether big or small, it's tempting to think we're entirely on our own, left to figure it out through sheer determination or personal strength. But life shows us repeatedly that not every battle can be conquered by human means alone. At times we encounter situations where our efforts, no matter how hard we try, feel inadequate. In these moments, we are reminded of a profound truth. There is a divine strategy at work, a plan woven together by God that considers every angle, every possibility, and every outcome. Understanding this doesn't mean we passively wait for things to happen. Rather, it means we recognize that while we have a role to play, our efforts are part of a much bigger picture that only God fully comprehends. Think about it this way: in life, we only see part of the tapestry. We can see the thread we're weaving today, but we can't see the full design that will come together tomorrow, next year, or even in the decades to come. But God sees it all. He sees the end from the beginning and knows how each piece fits into the larger pattern. Trusting this divine strategy requires faith in His vision, even when it looks different from our own. At times we may feel lost or uncertain, wondering why certain things are happening. Why are certain doors closing? Why are we facing struggles that seem so far beyond our control? This is where faith in the divine strategy becomes essential. It's about recognizing that closed doors, unexpected setbacks, and painful experiences are often redirects, part of a journey that leads to something better suited for our growth, our calling, and our purpose. While we may not understand it in the moment, God knows exactly why certain events unfold as they do, and He's guiding us to where we need to be. Our limited view makes it easy to assume we know what's best, but trusting in a divine plan allows us to release that assumption and lean into a deeper wisdom. Consider the way a master chess player thinks. In the midst of a match, a novice player may not fully grasp why certain moves are being made. A piece may be sacrificed, a move delayed, and it can all seem confusing and even counterproductive to the untrained eye. But a master knows what each move means, how each choice opens new possibilities and counters unseen threats. Similarly, God sees our lives in this comprehensive way, knowing that every delay, every challenge, is a step forward in the greater plan He has laid out. What seems like a setback to us could be a setup for something greater. This divine strategy often works quietly, beyond our immediate awareness, guiding us even when we feel like we're stumbling in the dark. God might be arranging people, circumstances, or opportunities that aren't visible to us right now. He might be preparing a path that will open doors we hadn't even considered. Our role is to trust that each challenge, each unexpected turn, is positioning us exactly where we need to be. Think about those times when life seemed to go off course only for things to eventually align in a way we couldn't have planned ourselves. That's the divine strategy at work. Trusting in this strategy also means accepting that we won't always get what we want when we want it. God's timing operates differently from ours. We often live in the urgency of now, seeking immediate answers, immediate solutions. But God operates on an eternal clock, seeing the impact that today's choices and experiences will have on our future, as well as on the lives of those around us. It's a reminder that God's timing is not just about us individually, it's about the broader story He's creating through each of us, a story that interconnects countless lives in ways we can't yet see. At the heart of trusting this divine strategy is humility. It's the willingness to admit that we don't have all the answers, that we're not fully in control, and that we don't need to be. When we trust that God's plan is for our good, that He's orchestrating every detail for our ultimate benefit and purpose, we can step back from the need to control every outcome. We can rest in the assurance that even when things don't go as planned, even when the road gets tough, we're still being led toward a purpose greater than ourselves. God's strategy, though it may seem hidden or even counterintuitive, is always rooted in love, purpose, and ultimate good. We may not understand every step, but we can trust that each one is leading us closer to our calling. Embracing this divine strategy is a journey in itself, a journey of faith, patience, and resilience. As we let go of our own need to see and understand every detail, we become more open to the ways God is moving in our lives, more attuned to the subtle ways He guides us forward. And as we trust in this divine strategy, we find strength, peace, and a confidence that no earthly challenge can shake. Understanding the power of surrender is one of the most profound steps in a journey of faith, especially when we're facing challenges that are beyond our capacity to control or understand. In our human nature, we often equate surrender with weakness, a kind of resignation in the face of defeat. But true surrender in a spiritual sense is anything but weak. It's a deliberate, courageous act of faith. Surrender means that instead of relying solely on our strength, we acknowledge that there is a greater power at work and that we're inviting that power to intervene in our lives. It is a choice to release our grip on what we cannot control and to place our trust in a divine plan. The journey to surrender begins when we recognize our own limitations. We live in a world that emphasizes self-reliance, determination, and control. Society tells us that we can make anything happen if we just work hard enough. And while there is truth in perseverance, not everything is within our control. Life often brings situations that are beyond our capacity to fix: a health crisis, a financial setback, a relationship challenge. These moments can be deeply frustrating and humbling because they show us that our strength has limits. But it's precisely in these moments of limitation that surrender becomes a powerful response. It's acknowledging, I've done all I can, and now I'm placing this in God's hands. Surrender also calls us to let go of our personal agendas. We often come to God with our own set of expectations, hoping that our prayers will align with the outcomes we've envisioned. But surrendering to God means releasing our attachment to specific outcomes and trusting that He knows what is truly best for us, even when it diverges from our own plans. This kind of surrender requires a deep level of humility, a willingness to say, even if this doesn't turn out the way I want, I trust that you have a reason. It's a hard step because it means letting go of our need to control every detail, but it's also freeing. In surrendering, we allow ourselves to move beyond the narrow confines of our own desires and open ourselves up to possibilities we may not have imagined. There's also a profound peace that comes with surrender. When we're trying to control every aspect of a situation, we often experience anxiety and fear. Our minds become consumed with what-if scenarios, and we end up carrying the weight of an outcome that may not even be ours to bear. But in surrendering, we shift that burden. We say to God, this is too much for me. I'm giving this to you. In that act of release, we find peace because we know we are not alone in carrying the weight. We're not abandoning the situation, but trusting that God, in His infinite wisdom, can handle what we cannot. Surrender doesn't mean passivity or inaction. It doesn't mean we stop caring about our problems or cease to work towards solutions. Rather, surrender is about a shift in perspective. It's continuing to do what we can while letting go of what's beyond us. We still pray, we still work, and we still show up, but we do so with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. This is an act of surrender, one that fully engages us while keeping our focus on God's guidance rather than our own understanding. We become willing vessels, ready to move as He leads, trusting that He will show us the next step when the time is right. When we surrender, we are not just giving up our problems, we are giving God permission to act in His way and in His time. This is often the most challenging part, especially when we're facing something urgent or painful. We want quick fixes and instant solutions, but surrender calls us to wait on God's timing. It's not always easy to wait, especially in a culture that prizes immediate results. But surrender teaches us patience. It's trusting that God is working even when we can't see the full picture. Sometimes it may seem like nothing is happening, but surrendering allows us to trust that God is setting things in motion that are beyond our sight. Moreover, surrender is an invitation for God to work miracles in our lives. When we step back and let God take the lead, we open up space for Him to do what only He can do. We might have our own ideas about how a problem should be solved, but God's solutions often go beyond anything we could have imagined. He has a way of weaving events and circumstances together in ways that are mysterious and miraculous. By surrendering, we make room for these divine interventions. We give God the freedom to work without our interference, and often the outcome is something far greater than we could have achieved on our own. Surrender strengthens our relationship with God. When we trust Him enough to surrender, we're saying that we believe in His love, His wisdom, and His ability to care for us. It deepens our faith because we're placing our lives, our dreams, and our challenges in His hands. And in that act of trust, we draw closer to Him, experiencing His presence in new and profound ways. Surrendering builds intimacy with God because it removes the barriers of fear and control that often keep us distant. It's a sacred exchange where we release our burdens and receive His peace, knowing that we are held in His love. In the end, surrender is a daily practice, a continual choice to let go and let God. It's not a one-time decision, but a constant willingness to trust, to let go, and to embrace the unknown, knowing that we are guided by a power far greater than our own. Faith over fear is a principle that speaks to the heart of how we approach life's challenges. Fear is a natural response to uncertainty and the unknown. But when we allow it to dictate our actions, we become limited, hesitant, and unable to move forward. Faith, on the other hand, offers a way to rise above that fear, to look at obstacles and setbacks with the confidence that God is with us, guiding us and equipping us with everything we need to overcome. When we choose faith over fear, we're not denying the presence of challenges or pretending that everything is easy. Rather, we're making a conscious decision to trust in a power greater than ourselves and to believe that, no matter how tough the road gets, we are not alone. Fear often emerges from a sense of vulnerability, a feeling that we are exposed or unprepared for what lies ahead. It may show up as worry about the future, concern for our loved ones, or doubt in our abilities. But faith steps in to counter that vulnerability by reminding us that we are divinely supported. Faith is the inner conviction that, even when things look bleak or uncertain, God has a plan, and that plan includes provision, guidance, and protection. It's a mindset that says, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. This belief allows us to face our fears without being paralyzed by them, to move forward, even when we're not sure of the next step. Choosing faith over fear doesn't mean that fear will vanish. Fear is a persistent emotion. It will try to creep in whenever we're faced with something that feels bigger than we are. But faith is about acknowledging that fear while deciding not to give it control. It's about recognizing that fear exists, but choosing not to let it dictate our actions, our decisions, or our outlook. Faith gives us the courage to act even in the presence of fear, because we know that our strength doesn't come from our own abilities alone, it comes from God. When we rely on God's strength, we realize that we don't have to have everything figured out. Faith allows us to move forward, even with trembling hands, because we know we are held by a power far greater than any challenge we face. There's also an important connection between faith and vision. Fear tends to narrow our focus, causing us to only see the immediate problem or threat. When we're afraid, our perspective shrinks. We become fixated on the obstacles, the what-ifs, and the worst-case scenarios. Faith, however, expands our vision. It helps us see beyond the immediate problem to a bigger picture. Faith gives us the confidence to believe that setbacks are temporary, that God is working in ways we can't yet see, and that our struggles today may be preparing us for strength and wisdom tomorrow. When we look at our lives through the lens of faith, we begin to understand that every obstacle, no matter how daunting, is part of a larger journey designed to grow us, strengthen us, and ultimately lead us closer to God. In moments of crisis, faith also offers a powerful sense of peace. When we're gripped by fear, our minds race, our hearts pound, and it feels like we're in a constant state of fight or flight. Faith, however, brings a calm that transcends our circumstances. This peace doesn't come from an absence of challenges, but from the assurance that God is in control. With faith, we can quiet our minds and still our hearts because we trust that we are being cared for and that no situation is beyond God's reach. This peace enables us to approach life's storms with resilience and grace, knowing that God's presence is our anchor, steadying us even in the fiercest winds. Faith over fear is about cultivating a mindset of abundance rather than scarcity. Fear often makes us feel like we don't have enough strength, enough resources, enough time. It creates a sense of lack that can lead to anxiety and desperation. Faith, on the other hand, reassures us that God provides abundantly. It reminds us that God is our source and that He will meet our needs, even if the path is unclear. With faith, we can trust that there will always be enough to take the next step, that we are equipped for each day's challenges, and that God's resources are limitless. This shift from scarcity to abundance allows us to move forward with confidence and gratitude, knowing that we are never in lack when we are in God's care. Another powerful aspect of choosing faith over fear is that it opens us up to take bold actions. Fear holds us back, keeps us in our comfort zones, and prevents us from pursuing our dreams or reaching our potential. Faith, however, gives us the courage to step out, to take risks, and to embrace opportunities we might otherwise avoid. When we live in faith, we're willing to venture into the unknown because we trust that God will be there with us. Faith propels us forward, helping us to grow and expand rather than shrink back. It encourages us to say yes to the opportunities God places before us, even if they seem daunting, because we know He will provide everything we need. Faith over fear is also a testimony. When others see us facing difficult circumstances with faith rather than fear, it serves as a powerful witness to God's presence in our lives. Our courage, peace, and resilience become an example to others of what it means to trust in God. By choosing faith, we inspire others to also look beyond their fears and seek strength from a higher power. Our choice to live in faith, especially during hard times, becomes a light that shines, offering hope and encouragement to those around us. In this way, choosing faith over fear not only transforms our own lives, but also impacts the lives of those we encounter. Allowing divine intervention is about recognizing and inviting God's hand into our lives, especially when we encounter moments where our own strength, wisdom, or efforts fall short. In a world where self-reliance and control are often valued above all else, it can be challenging to let go and make space for divine guidance. However, allowing divine intervention is a conscious decision to step back and let God step in, trusting that He can do what we cannot. It's about surrendering the need to have all the answers and opening ourselves to the idea that God's solutions may look different from what we expect, but are ultimately for our highest good. One of the first steps to allowing divine intervention is acknowledging our limitations. Human nature drives us to believe that we can solve every problem through effort, strategy, and persistence. But life has a way of humbling us, presenting situations that no amount of planning or willpower can easily resolve. These are often the moments that lead us to seek God's intervention. When we acknowledge that our own abilities have limits, we invite God to work in ways that exceed our understanding and transcend the limitations we face. By embracing our own limitations, we allow space for God's unlimited power to become active in our lives. Allowing divine intervention also requires a heart that is open to receiving God's guidance, even if it comes in unexpected ways. Often we have preconceived ideas about how our problems should be resolved, but God's ways are higher than our ways. Sometimes, divine intervention might not look like a grand miracle. It might appear as a simple nudge, a small but significant shift in perspective, or an opportunity that seems ordinary but turns out to be transformative. Being open to these subtle forms of intervention requires a willingness to quiet our minds, to pause, and to listen for God's voice. When we approach each situation with a receptive heart, we create space for God to move, to guide, and to provide answers we hadn't considered. Another important aspect of divine intervention is timing. God's intervention doesn't always come when we want it to or in the way we expect. Sometimes it seems like He's silent or slow to respond, but in reality, He's working in His perfect timing. This can be one of the most challenging aspects of faith because, as humans, we often seek immediate results. However, God's timing is intentional and takes into account factors we may not understand. He may delay an answer because He is preparing us, shaping our character, or orchestrating events in a way that will bring about the best outcome for us. Trusting in divine timing allows us to wait patiently and expectantly, knowing that God is always working, even when it's not immediately visible. Divine intervention often requires us to act in faith, even when the path isn't clear. Sometimes, God's guidance will ask us to take a step into the unknown, to trust in Him without having all the answers laid out before us. This can feel risky, even frightening, but it's also where faith grows. By taking that first step, we demonstrate our trust in God's plan and our willingness to follow His lead, even if we don't fully understand where it will take us. Divine intervention is often activated by our obedience and willingness to move even in uncertainty. This act of faith allows God to reveal the next steps as we go, leading us along a path that ultimately fulfills His purpose for our lives. When we allow divine intervention, we're also allowing ourselves to experience God's peace. Life's challenges can be overwhelming, leading to anxiety, stress, and worry. But when we trust that God is involved, working behind the scenes and intervening on our behalf, we find a peace that surpasses understanding. This peace isn't dependent on the absence of problems, but is rooted in the assurance that we are not carrying our burdens alone. It's a peace that comes from knowing that God's wisdom and love are guiding every step, even when the outcome is unknown. This sense of peace enables us to face challenges with a calm mind and a steady heart, anchored in the belief that God is actively working for our good. Another powerful aspect of allowing divine intervention is that it leads to transformation. When we invite God into our lives and let Him take control, we are often transformed in ways we hadn't anticipated. Divine intervention isn't just about changing our circumstances, it's also about changing us. God uses every challenge, every setback to refine us, to build our character, and to strengthen our faith. Through divine intervention, we grow in resilience, patience, and humility. We become more aware of God's presence, more attuned to His voice, and more confident in His ability to lead us through even the most difficult seasons. Divine intervention also brings blessings that go beyond our immediate needs. Sometimes when God intervenes, He provides solutions that address not just the problem at hand, but other areas of our lives as well. We may seek God's help with one specific issue, only to find that His intervention brings unexpected blessings, new opportunities, or relationships that enrich our lives in ways we couldn't have foreseen. God's intervention often works in layers, addressing both seen and unseen needs, touching areas of our lives that we hadn't even realized needed His touch. By allowing God to work freely, we open ourselves to a breadth of blessings that only He can provide. Allowing divine intervention strengthens our relationship with God. Each time we invite Him into our lives and witness His hand at work, our faith grows stronger. We become more aware of His presence, more sensitive to His voice, and more confident in His love and care for us. This deepening relationship transforms how we approach future challenges. With each experience of divine intervention, we build a history with God, a record of moments where He showed up, carried us through, and provided in ways we couldn't have achieved alone. This record serves as a foundation for greater faith, enabling us to trust more deeply and to invite His intervention without hesitation. Trusting in God's plan, especially during difficult times, requires a deep, unwavering faith that isn't always easy to maintain. Life is filled with uncertainty, and we often find ourselves in situations where we can't see how things will work out. Yet, trusting in God's plan means believing that every challenge, every setback, and every unanswered question serves a purpose within the grand design He has for us. It's about understanding that God's wisdom far exceeds our own, and that His timing and methods are perfect, even when they don't align with our expectations. Trusting in His plan allows us to approach life's storms with a sense of peace and purpose, knowing that we are not abandoned but are being led through something that will ultimately bring growth, wisdom, and deeper faith. At the core of trusting in God's plan is the understanding that He sees a bigger picture that we cannot. Our perspective is limited to the here, and now we see only what's directly in front of us. But God, in His infinite wisdom, sees how each moment connects to the next. He understands how today's challenges are preparing us for tomorrow's blessings. It's like looking at the backside of a tapestry where all we see are threads that seem chaotic and disjointed, but God sees the front, a beautiful, complete picture. When we trust in God's plan, we acknowledge that our view is limited and that there is a purpose woven into every experience, even those that seem difficult or painful in the moment. Trusting in God's plan also involves letting go of our desire to control every outcome. As humans, we naturally want to steer our lives in a certain direction. We set goals, make plans, and work hard to achieve our vision of success. But when things don't go according to our plans, it's easy to feel frustrated, disappointed, or even resentful. Trusting in God's plan means releasing our grip on what we think our lives should look like and surrendering to His design instead. This doesn't mean we abandon our dreams or stop striving toward our goals. Rather, it means we hold them with open hands, willing to let God shape and redirect them as He sees fit. This kind of trust allows us to experience freedom because we're no longer bound by the anxiety of having to control everything. We can relax in the knowledge that ultimately our lives are in the hands of a loving and wise Creator who knows what's best. During tough times, trusting in God's plan often means embracing patience. God's timing is rarely our timing, and His pace can feel slow, especially when we're eager for a resolution. In our modern world, we're accustomed to instant solutions, quick fixes, and immediate gratification. But God's plan often involves a process, and that process requires time. He may allow us to go through seasons of waiting, not to test our patience for the sake of it, but to cultivate qualities like endurance, resilience, and humility. Patience developed through trust in God's plan becomes a form of spiritual strength, allowing us to remain calm and hopeful, even when answers seem delayed. It teaches us to rely on God's provision in His own timing, knowing that He is never late but always on time, even if we can't see it right away. Trusting in God's plan also brings a sense of purpose to our pain. Life is filled with moments of struggle and heartache, and it's natural to wonder why we have to go through certain hardships. Trusting in God means believing that even our painful experiences are part of a larger story. God doesn't waste any part of our lives. He uses everything, the joys, the sorrows, the victories, and the defeats to shape us and draw us closer to Him. When we trust in His plan, we start to see our pain not as a pointless burden, but as a pathway to growth and transformation. We realize that God is using our challenges to strengthen our faith, refine our character, and prepare us for the next chapter in our lives. This understanding brings a sense of peace, knowing that our suffering has meaning, and that God is working through it to bring about something good. Another aspect of trusting in God's plan is learning to let go of the need for answers. We're often driven by a desire to understand why things happen. We want explanations, reasons, and logical answers to our problems. But trusting in God means accepting that we may not always get the answers we seek, and that's okay. God's ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are beyond our understanding. There is a mystery to His plan, a divine wisdom that we may not fully grasp in this life. Trusting in God allows us to live with unanswered questions and still find peace, because we know that He has a reason, even if we can't see it. This act of trust frees us from constantly seeking explanations and allows us to focus on the present, knowing that God's plan is perfect, even in its mystery. When we trust in God's plan, we also become more resilient. Life will always present challenges, but when we believe that God is guiding us, we are less likely to be shaken by setbacks. Trusting in God's plan helps us develop a firm foundation, a sense of confidence that no matter what comes our way, we are equipped to handle it because God is with us. This resilience isn't about denying the difficulties we face, it's about facing them with a heart that is anchored in faith. It's knowing that even in our darkest moments, God is working in us and through us, strengthening our spirit and building our endurance. This resilience becomes a testimony to others, a visible example of what it looks like to live a life rooted in trust and faith. Trusting in God's plan brings us closer to Him. Each time we choose to trust, we are actively building our relationship with God. Trust requires intimacy, a closeness that grows as we continually rely on His guidance and support. As we trust in Him, we start to notice His presence more fully in our lives. We see His hand at work in both big moments and small details, and our relationship with Him deepens. This trust transforms our faith from something abstract into something deeply personal and experiential. It allows us to walk through life with a sense of companionship, knowing that God is not just a distant force, but a loving guide who is intimately involved in every aspect of our journey. In trusting God's plan, we find peace, purpose, and strength. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to deepen our faith and align ourselves more closely with His will. Trusting in His plan doesn't remove life's hardships, but it changes how we face them, allowing us to live with hope, resilience, and a deep-seated confidence that we are exactly where we're meant to be, held and guided by a love that is unwavering and eternal.